Hi, today welcome back to another Pharmacy Republic video. This series of videos is going to look at how energy is produced inside the cells and what we can take, what supplements can we take to help increase our energy levels. So if you remember back to your school days in your biology lectures, you probably remember that there was something called mitochondria which was responsible for making energy in cells. If we look at here, this is like a close-up of a mitochondria. You have about 500 of these in the cells, and they're like little mini nuclear power stations. They generate huge amounts of energy. Gram for gram, we actually produce more energy than the sun. You know, the equivalent of energy production, once you'll see how when ATP is produced, that's like 30 million volts. It's like a thunderbolt. And all this is compressed in a tiny space. It occurs over 7 nanometers and 4 nanometers, tiny space. So if we scale up gram for gram, we're more powerful than the sun. So within the cell, you have about 500 of these mitochondria. Okay, so when we eat, all we're doing, the process is we're delivering electrons to the inside of the mitochondria. So food is broken down into glucose. The glucose, imagine this is the cytosol, okay? So we're outside, this is the membrane of the mitochondria, and outside is the cytosol. So glucose enters the cytosol where it's broken down into pyruvate, okay? So glucose is a 6-chain carbon ring. It's broken down into 2 3-chain pyruvates. The pyruvate is then transported across these membranes to the matrix here. And remember, the whole process is about transferring electrons, okay? High energy electrons. The pyruvate then is converted to acetyl coenzyme A, and it is entered into this kind of cycle, Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. I've got my t-shirt on so you can see this, show you the nerd I am. So this is the Krebs cycle. So we can see pyruvate joins and it's converted to acetyl coenzyme A, which is converted to citrate and eventually goes around the cycle. And the sole aim is to produce high energy electrons, which are carried by these electron carriers, NADH and FADH, nicotine, adenine dinucleotide, and flavin adenine dinucleotide. So once we've grabbed those high energy electrons from the Krebs cycle, they're transported to this inner membrane, and spanning this inner membrane are a number of protein complexes that are embedded in the membrane. So we have 1, 3, and 4, and you have 2 as well, which is not really, spans it. So nicotine, NADH, contains the high energy electrons, which is grabbed from the Krebs cycle, and it transfers it to complex 1. Protein complex 1 then transfers it to CoEnzyme Q10. Here we go, that supplement. And the CoEnzyme Q10 grabs these electrons and passes it to complex 3. FADH, flavin adenine dinucleotide, carries its high energy electrons and transfers it to complex 2, and again transfers it to coenzyme Q10, which then transfers it to complex 3. Then complex 3 transfers the electrons to cytochrome C, via cytochrome C to complex 4. There in complex 4, the 2 electrons are combined with 2 hydrogens mixed with oxygen to produce water. So essentially, let's just visualize this. So we've grabbed our high energy electrons, the NADH, and we transfer them to complex 1. And then this is a coenzyme Q10, which is going to carry the electrons to complex 3, then via cytochrome C to complex 4. The 2 electrons combine with 2 hydrogen and oxygen to produce water. So oxygen is the final electron acceptor. So you throw electrons here, they pass through each protein complex using carrier coenzymes like coenzyme Q10, and the final electron acceptor is oxygen. Okay, As we're passing electrons through the complex, we're generating energy, okay? And this energy is used to pump these hydrogen ions across this inner membrane space. Remember, that's a tiny, tiny amount, 4 nanometers. And so you get a buildup of hydrogen ions in this inner membrane space. A useful way of looking at it is basically we're pumping these hydrogen ions up a mountain, so like a reservoir. So we're pumping, if you look at a hydroelectric dam, we pump water up the mountain and let it flow down. When it flows down, it turns a turbine, creates energy. Essentially, that's all we're doing with this electron transport chain. All it's doing is generating energy as electrons are passed from one complex to another to pump hydrogen ions across this membrane. Once you've got a buildup of hydrogen ions, you created a gradient where there's more in this intermembrane space than on the inside, and they're allowed to flow through this ATP synthase. This is like a molecular motor. As the hydrogen ions flow down, it turns a turbine, and then we get the production of ATP. ATP is adenine triphosphate. This is the energy currency of the body. Whatever you do, sleeping, breathing, running, reading, watching this video, you're using energy and you're expending ATP. The energy is in this high energy phosphate bond. Okay, so that's the sole purpose. We grab the glucose. Glucose gets transported into the matrix after being converted to pyruvate first, and we're transferring these high energy electrons, passes through the citric acid cycle to these energy carriers, then gets transported along the electron transport chain to produce this hydrogen gradient, which flows back down via ATP synthase to produce ATP, which is exported to the rest of the body. So a good way of imagining mitochondria, for all you Star Wars buffs, it kind of like resembles the midichlorians. So the higher the number of midichlorians you had, the more powerful a Jedi was. And we know that Anakin had something like 20,000 and he was a super Jedi. So that's a good way of, a good analogy if you want. Yeah. So again, if our mitochondria are functioning well, that means we have more energy. Now, antioxidants such as glutathione, why are they important? You've probably heard of free radicals. Okay, so if the electrons are restricted to this chain, there's not a problem. Okay, but sometimes if we get leakage, then what happens is they prematurely combine with oxygen and they produce superoxides, which can then go and damage other parts of the cell. It can go and damage some DNA within the mitochondria, and then we get these diseases and we get degeneration. And this is what is thought to be responsible for aging, for chronic diseases. So that's where these antioxidants can mop up those electrons which are escaping from the chain. It's like, for example, if there was no no CoEnzyme Q10, rather than passing the electrons, as I'll go to pour this water, there'll be no cut there, it will just fall on the floor. That's a good way of looking at it. So it's making sure that there's not an excessive amount of free radicals being formed by electrons being released from this chain. Having said that, free radicals are important in the sense that they actually signal when we need to produce more mitochondria because we have abundance of high energy electrons. So everything has its place, and remember, it's about balance. Okay, so I hope this has gone some way to explain how energy is produced in the body and how we can take certain supplements like CoEnzyme Q10 and how they fit in the electron transport chain are important in helping to generate electrons. So in the next videos, we'll look at things like PQQ, which is found in dark chocolate, why this is important in the production of energy, and then we'll look at things like D-ribose. Again, so what we want to do is put the science behind the supplements so you understand why you're taking something and how it works. Okay, If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe and click the notification channel so you'll know when the next video is released. Okay, that's it for now, and look forward to seeing you guys next time.